So, many years ago, as I recently did the video in reference to the Homeowners Association board and that whole thing, now I'm going to do the video in reference to when I was involved with the stay-at-home moms group. First off, I'm medically retired from the Army because of a head injury that I had on Palm Sunday in 2000 and the medical after effects. Now, I dealt with the conversations in reference to literally being forced to be a part of something I didn't want to be a part of at all. I'm not the type of person who gets along in certain regards with individuals who are closed-minded. And not saying that all stay-at-home moms are closed-minded, but the type in the group that I knew I was going to wind up being in proved to be exactly what they were. Now, I'm not saying that all stay-at-home moms have nannies. Obviously not. The group that I was a part of did. There was only like one other female other than myself who did not have somebody else raising her child, or in my case, children. She was the only other brunette. All of the other females in the stay-at-home moms group that I was in were either doctors' wives, techie wives, lawyers' wives, like I said, were going to be who were in the group. Nothing wrong with either the spouses of nor the professions, as long as in an honorable way, or honest, I should say. But in reference to the ones that I dealt with, I did not have this hair or the tattoos at the time, but I still did not have the pretty words that were supposed to be used because they preferred that instead of reality. And so in that stay-at-home moms group, I was convinced to be a part of the board. One of the other blondes, not me being a blonde, but like there were plenty of them, that thought that I'd be a great bubbly personality to be in the welcoming committee. Didn't think that was going to be a good idea. But after a conversation or 5 or 10 with my now dead ex-husband, I wound up taking the board position, kind of like how I wound up involved with the stay-at-home moms group. So one day I get a phone call. I answer the phone. And the female on the other end wants information. I tell her, okay, this is what it is. Tell her what the dues are. She got mad at me for telling her that there were dues. And it was one of those, well, I am not in charge of that. If you want to be upset, I'll give you the next person up the chain of commands information because I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to do any of that. She took the number. She called the female. I got a phone call from that female. She tells me all sorts of things and I'm like, listen, I don't have patience for that. Like at all. Like I don't have patience for your temper tantrum. And I'm trying to be nice, and I'm trying to be nice, and then she said something that just pissed me off. And I was like, the next time you open your mouth, you better have a in it, and I will give you permission to speak when I want to hear your voice. Otherwise, if you feel like speaking to me instead, and that'll That'll be that. And she was extremely offended by that. And I was like, yeah, well, I told you I am not the stereotypical stay-at-home mom. So, number one, again, I didn't have a nanny. I took care of my own children. Number two, when it came to the meeting at my house, I was responsible for them showing up. So I cleaned the house, made sure my children were okay, of course. I mowed the lawn, I trimmed the hedges, I cooked some food. I was under the impression others were going to bring food. I'm glad I cooked the way I do. And so nobody brought their children with them. I was, again, a stay-at-home moms group. Who would think that a stay-at-home mom would actually be a mom to their child? I didn't think it took a head injury to figure that out. But whatever. So one of the females, specifically Felicia, says, you need to fire your gardener. I was like, oh, why do I need to fire myself? Like, just wondering, And Felicia said, your gardener missed weed eating. So you need to get your gardener back here so that way your gardener can weed eat around the edges. I looked at her and I said, well, excuse me, my bad. I apologize because, from 7 o'clock in the morning, I have been taking care of my 2 children. I've been cleaning, cooking, mowing the lawn, trimming the hedges, and I just didn't have the time nor the realistically desire to go and weed eat because I wanted to take a shower before everybody showed up. Excuse me, my bad. I'm so sorry that, I took care of that. She was offended, and I was like, really? This is a stay-at-home moms club, right? Yeah. Where are your children? Why would we bring our children to a stay-at-home moms club meeting? I don't know. I don't think it takes a head injury to figure out that one, but okay. Whatever. So after a certain amount of time, at like 12 o'clock, I started, giving my children lunch, even though they were having snacks. And then I put them upstairs down for a nap. And one of the other stay-at-home moms on the board looks at me and she says, you are so strict with your children. Where are yours? Before you want to criticize me, where are your children? And the female looks at me and she goes, you don't have to, give them a schedule. And I look at her and I'm like, and why would you think that? I don't think it takes a head injury to figure out children do better with a schedule. Even adults do better with a schedule. So, excuse me if I give my children a schedule to make sure that they get enough rest, to make sure that they eat correctly, all this sort of stuff. The females were all, and it was just one of those, I do not have patience for this. I grew up as a tomboy. I may not remember everything the way normal people who haven't had a head injury do, but I don't think it takes a head injury to figure this stuff out, ladies. I mean, jeez. And so I listened to these females berate me in my backyard, on my property, in the state of Texas, about how I should raise my children in my house when their children were nowhere to be found and they had nannies who gave their children a schedule. So the one female who was the next up in the chain of command as far as the board, she very minimally spoke. Because anytime she went to speak, I'd look at her and be like, I don't, I don't think that I said that was, I guess. And so when she got the memo, the other moms would be like, so what do you think? What do you think? And she'd just, and then look at me and I'd be like, what do you think? To the question you were asked. Good that you understand exactly where you are. And the female would answer and all that sort of stuff. Well, at some point, one of the board members, like the freaking president or whatever, she goes, so does anybody have any announcements for the group? And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at her and I'm like, ugh, it's like cheerleading, but worse. From when I was forced to be a cheerleader. I know one guy definitely would understand that. Not because he was a cheerleader, but because he heard me complain about the cheerleaders. And every complaint I had was 100% legitimate. And so, all other females are, oh, I got my manicure, I got a pedicure. And it's like, that's your announcement, that's what you're announcing, that's the big news, is that you got a manicure, a pedicure, I guess. Whatever. I guess if it's for a special event. No, it wasn't. Okay. Whatever. All right. So, one of the females looks at the one that had the phone call and says, don't you have some news? And she looks at me and I look at her and I'm like, do you have some news? And Felicia is picking up on this and she's like, why are you allowing Susan to speak that way? And I looked at Felicia and I was like, I'm not technically speaking unless my mouth moves and sound comes out of my face. Like, I don't know if you understand how speaking works, but that's usually what happens. Your mouth moves, there's some stuff that happens inside of your body for the sound to come out of your face. Just throwing that out there. But looking to the female that was on the phone call, I'm like, so, do you have any news and announcement? And much to my surprise, female says, yeah, I kind of do. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, what's your announcement? She goes and says, she's pregnant. Which is I'm not laughing at that. So all the other females are all excited. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at her. And I did say, I guess you put your in the wrong place. Because you obviously didn't take my advice. But then again, that comment that I made was less than a week ago. So you're probably more than a week pregnant. So I'll give you that leniency. But all the females are excited. And I look at her, and in all genuineness, I look at her and I said, I'm not trying to be rude when I say this, so please don't take it as such, especially after the last whatever. And she's just like, uh-huh. And I said, don't your two children, have leukemia? Weren't they born with that? And all the other females are like, oh, that's so great, I did it. And I'm like, no, you bitches shut up. Answer my question. And the female just kind of snapped a little bit, and she was like, yeah, they do. They do. you're not going to make fun of me for that. I was like, absolutely not. But I am going to say, I don't usually agree with abortion. I have a thing. I understand abortion for certain reasons. One being from rape. I absolutely understand if you are incapable of loving that child and genuinely taking care of it. I understand that being a thing. Also, at the same time, though, I also understand there are plenty of people who would be more than ecstatic to take care of that child. So that sort of thing. But one of my bigger proponents that I do understand abortion for, as far as reasons are concerned, is if the child and or the mother are going to have serious health complications, or there's going to be a major risk. And so, and I did explain this in the board meeting, and the female looked at me, and it was one of those, I think, and I'm not trying to be rude when I say this, I think you should actually genuinely consider that, because if you wind up with a third child being born with leukemia, one time, that's happenstance. 2 times, that's a little bit of a coinky-dink. 3rd time, you gotta take stuff more seriously. And I said, what would it do to you if you were to find out that that was something that would not be able to be prevented? And she just kind of was quiet. All the other females were among themselves, and I don't have patience for you. I'm genuinely asking you a question, and what you do with this is genuinely up to you and your husband. However, I want you to genuinely talk about it and think about it, not just for you guys, because what would it do to your husband if, again, a third one? Would that not hurt his heart? And not just his, obviously yours. You're the mom and all that sort of stuff. So obviously something in that regard, think about that. And then also take into consideration your other 2 children. And she just kind of, I didn't really appreciate the comment you made on the phone. And I said, I get that. But what you were yelling at me for was not important. This is genuinely important. This is genuinely something you should take into consideration. And she just kind of, oh my God. And I said, it's not that I'm a fan of that, but I also understand there are genuine reasons. Another reason, I kind of have a one-timer thing where it's like, if you're going to have an abortion because you're too young, well, you chose to have sex. But I also understand that situation. And so it's one of those, again, there are the adoption agencies where plenty of people would be ecstatic to take that. But I understand it. There is the long-term repercussion, though. You will always wonder what that child looks like, or would have looked like. You will always wonder whether or not that child would have had, certain attributes of you or whoever you were with. There are many aftermath ramifications that you will always have if you go through with an abortion at a young age. Again, I understand it. I do. I very much understand. Not because I've gone through it, but it just makes sense to me. And so, it wasn't to be mean. It wasn't to be hurtful. It wasn't to be rude. I know the words sometimes just kind of snap somebody's attention, but it's just one of those, sometimes that's the only way to get something across. And so that female just kind of took that in, and later on, Felicia was like, oh, I don't remember her guy's name, but they're engaged. And it's like, oh, okay, so cool. If you want, I can make a wedding cake for you if you want help with that. No big deal. I know how to cook. I like to cook. I haven't made a wedding cake before, I admit that. But, I make a wedding cake. I know how to cook. And so she was like, oh, that'll be great. And I said, all you have to do is, pay for the supplies. No big deal. And so those who do bakery stuff understand this. Those of you who don't, you can research this sort of stuff. So Felicia wanted a 3-tier wedding cake that would feed 250 or 300 people. Okay. Her colors, ironically, like Patricia, my biological sister, were black, silver, and lavender. Okay. I made marzipan from scratch. I made edible pearls, the marzipan type, from scratch. I made edible glitter from scratch. I got, the Wilson baking pans. So each of I obviously am very bad with numbers, I don't deny that. But I got, I think it was a 4 or a 5-inch pan for the first tier, but I did 2 layers per individual tier because of doing different filling in between. I realize now that a normal wedding cake person probably cuts it in the middle, but I didn't think about that until right now. A little late. I made the cake from scratch. I made the preserves from scratch and the different flavors. Everything that I did, I made it from scratch. And so if you can envision this, it was for the first tier being about, 24 inches at the base, and then 18 inches, and then 9 inches, and then 2 of each at the 4 to 5 inch depth with the, filling in between. And I used real milk and real eggs and stuff like that. It was a lot of work. But then I also made the year anniversary cake that you put in the freezer and stuff like that for, all that sort of stuff. So that was the smallest tier that I had done of the 2, and I realized that's a little bit late now. I mean, that wedding was back in 2003 or 2004, somewhere around there. Well, Felicia says, the wedding I wasn't invited to because of the family or whatever. Okay, fine. One of the other stay-at-home moms, the other brunette, had made the groom's cake. I was like, okay, cool. She's got one, I got the other. Well, at the wedding reception, Felicia gets mad at me because the other female who made the groom's cake, which was a 1-tier cake, had only charged her $30. I gave her the receipt, the different receipts and stuff like that. And so at that time, I carried cash more often. So, unfortunately, in that regard, I don't have the credit card receipt or debit card receipts, but it, is what it is. So at the wedding reception, Felicia is also complaining because she had the event catered and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, well, you have all the extra food. We're in a fireman's house. It was a fireman area where you could have the ball and stuff like that. And I was like, why don't you just leave it for the firemen? Because I'm sure that they definitely would be, they've probably got a kitchen. You can throw it in there, leave a little note, and they'll disperse it, no problem. Felicia was pissy about that. Then Felicia was mad because in the city of San Antonio, Texas, first and foremost, I'm going to ask, because I don't think it takes a head injury to figure this out. However, are people in the state of Texas known for being into sports? The answer is yes, that was a rhetorical question. Second, we were in the city of San Antonio, and she was complaining that people who had tickets to the Spurs game were at the Spurs game that they had tickets for instead of her wedding reception. And I was like, well, they RSVP'd, right? And she was like, yeah. I said, well, is it a championship game? And that's why? Because, it makes sense for the RSVP to be like, yeah, I'll be there. But like, if the Spurs got into the playoffs or any hometown team who's playing at home, I don't think it takes a head injury to figure out that the hometown team, because it was a home game apparently for the San Antonio Spurs in San Antonio, Texas. I think they were even playing the Mavericks on top of which. So you got Dallas and San Antonio playing a championship match the night of her reception. It might have been another team. It might have been the Lakers. I don't know. Either way, like, San Antonio, Texas has the San Antonio Spurs, so it doesn't take a head injury to figure out that people who have season pass tickets and or purchase the championship match tickets are not gonna go to a reception for a wedding. And unless you're gonna have the championship match playing on a TV, which I did tell her in like the hallway area. Well, then she got mad at me because I said that, and she watched her husband and a couple of groomsmen turn on a dime and just go. And she was like, you gave the males or you gave those guys, whatever word she used. I think she said boys, but whatever. You gave those guys the idea to go find a television to watch the San Antonio Spurs championship match in San Antonio, Texas. Okay. So let me get this straight. Their options at this point in time are to go see if they can find a TV to watch a game that they probably would prefer to be watching at home or at a bar or something like that. But hey, there's food, so there is that benefit in the reception, but they'd probably rather do that. And so their options as San Antonio Spurs fans is to either speak with people at your reception, most likely complaining about how they would rather be watching the San Antonio Spurs championship game instead of being at a reception for a wedding. That's not going to work out. And it is what it is. I guessed that. I don't know. Anyway, or go and see if maybe in a fire station there's a TV that they could hook up to watch the San Antonio Spurs championship live. And you're mad at least they're still at your reception, so you really can't complain, right? I thought that was, like, ideal, but whatever. She got mad at me for that. Okay, whatever. Well, I wound up standing around with the guys watching the San Antonio Spurs championship instead because, number one, it was closest to the door for me to go outside to go smoke. number two, the reasons that I just said, as far as I didn't know anybody at the reception except for Felicia and one other female. She was with her husband and they were talking. And I think they wound up watching the San Antonio Spurs championship game anyway. But I did get introduced to one of Felicia's childhood friends from like high school or whatever. Well, a few weeks later, we wound up going to some dance club. And I was told by Felicia's friend that she threw away the entire wedding cake. And I said, what? And her friend was like, yeah, Felicia threw away the entire wedding cake. I said, I made that from scratch. And that was enough to feed, as my understanding was, but obviously a lot more, at least 250 people. Like, those fire department guys, they could have come back, again, put it in the fridge, leave a note. I'm sure you had a phone number to contact, at least let them know something. And if not, take it to a homeless shelter, take it to a police station, take it to a military. I mean, there are so many different options that you could have done. And she just listened to me and she was like, yeah, well, Felicia threw it away. And I said, well, I'm kind of pissed off. I'm kind of really pissed off. I mean, not just because I put a lot of time and effort into doing that, but because it was a wasted amount of food. And a lot at that. And so Felicia comes up to me and she's like, how dare you be upset that I did what I wanted to do with the wedding cake? And I was like, okay, I understand that you technically have the right to do what you want to do with it. However, I'm not mad at the fact that you threw it away. I'm mad at the fact that you didn't, like, at least attempt to give it to a group that would have genuinely ate it. And Felicia said, well, you're just mad because we didn't cut into the cake, and her friend, whatever her name was, had told you that she thought it was too pretty for anybody to cut into. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm glad that it was too pretty for it to be cut into, but at the same time, it could have fed at least 200. Now, being firefighters, if it was left at the firehouse, I will say it probably would have fed like maybe 100 of them for a 250 cake, because of depending on what they were doing for work. Not taking into consideration, because I don't know how, I obviously did the numbers wrong, I don't deny that. But obviously there was more. And so the amount of food that was wasted, I'm not upset that you thought it was a pretty wedding cake. I'm glad you actually thought it was a pretty wedding cake. I was kind of nervous about that. I was more upset at the fact that it was wasted, and there are guys who could have eaten it, and not being sexist, just the East Coast term of guys, because there are female firefighters, there are female police officers, there are female homeless. There are female soldiers. There's females, obviously, just as easy. So there's all these different individuals that could have either taken one of the 3 different tiers and or shared it amongst themselves and or all these other different things that could have occurred. And while, okay, hey, I'm glad you thought it was so pretty, whatever, at the same time, that was a lot of guys who could have, if there was a major fire and nobody had the energy to cook food, it would have been right there. If there was a whole bunch of emergencies and nobody had the ability to even go and order pizza because they were so tired, then, they had something. And it had milk, real milk. It had eggs, real eggs. It had fruit, Like actual fruit. I did the whole preserve thing myself. So, and each layer a different flavor and all that. So it had essentially almost all of the food groups in it. Well, grains, it had the grains. And sugars, a little bit much, but you know. And, oh, and I also made individual rosettes as well as real roses. Well, I didn't make the real roses. I bought those. But I made individual rosettes to go around the tiers in between the handmade pearls. So, you know, I'm just saying, not to be like all snobby or anything, I'm just saying I made that and whatever. But it doesn't change the fact that all those different groups could have had something. And even if it was just a couple of calls to at least see, it was just one of those, are you kidding me? Why would you be mad at me for being upset that you could have had all those guys at least have something? And, you know, not that I want it, but of course it does happen. You know, firefighters, they, you know, get back, they need something to eat real quick, get another phone call, a cake, not, you know, I mean, it'll have a couple crumbs here and there, but, you know, don't need much more than especially the way I made it, you know, just a paper towel, a paper plate, a napkin, something, and they could eat on their way to the next thing. Same thing with police officers. And then because of the marzipan icing, it wouldn't have gotten all over everything, so it would have been even more clean than that. But Felicia was like, you're not allowed to be in the stay-at-home moms group anymore. Oh, darn. Oh. Oh, no. You mean I can't be in the group that I didn't want to be in to begin with? But hey, at least I couldn't get my ass beat for another conversation. So at least there was that. But then, you know, yeah, then she was mad because I had said before being kicked out of the Stay-at-Home Moms Club, at her and her then husband's house, you know, I didn't know, she didn't tell him that we were going to the dance club. So me saying, what is the name of the dance club we're going to, is not my fault. Just saying, she got all upset about that, and it was one of those, okay, well, first you didn't tell me that it was a secret that we were going to a dance club. Second, you're married now to a techie guy. Maybe a techie guy does techie stuff to like, be like, hey, let me make sure this bitch isn't cheating on. It makes sense to me. I mean, not that I agree with it, but at the same time, it's just one of those, you know, I don't know what her prior history was as far as whether or not she had cheated on other people before her marriage to that guy. Makes sense to me at certain regard. But yeah, it was just one of those, yeah, I think I have every right to be upset at the fact that you wasted the food. That's my opinion. And, you know, again, there were plenty of police officers, firefighters, you know, soldiers, homeless, like there were plenty of areas that she could have taken that wedding cake to. But oh darn, I was kicked out of a stay-at-home moms group that I didn't want to be in. And then she was upset that I wasn't upset. Then she threw a titty baby temper tantrum because I wasn't like, no, let us, yay. And, you know, it is what it is. So, ta-da. I know that there is at least a handful of guys I knew growing up in New Jersey, as well as some guys that I knew in Illinois that would be like, so let's do this math. You are mad that she didn't want to fight to be in a club that she didn't want to be in to begin with, and that she was literally beaten in order to be in that club by her now dead ex-husband. Yeah, that makes perfect sense as to why she didn't want to be in the club. And then, all the females for the most part, not all of them, but the majority of them, being exactly as I described they were going to be. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it takes a head injury to figure that out at all, whatsoever. In any way, shape, or form. I don't know. And then again, a whole bunch of those same exact guys being like, so there was a championship basketball game that was in the home area for the home team, and you were upset that there were people who went to the home team championship match to see it in person, or instead of going to your reception, went to a bar or went to a championship team party. I mean, I grew up playing football, basketball, street hockey, ice hockey, baseball and stuff like that with guy friends. I wasn't on a team for that, but just hung around with the guys and played with them and stuff like that. And I don't think there is one guy that I grew up playing with, or then later when in high school, like that would be like, oh, that, no, I don't think it takes a head injury to figure that out. But that is my experience with the stay-at-home moms group that I didn't want to be a part of. And, it's kind of like if the females who were in Crystal Lake South on the cheerleading squad being upset at me for not fighting to be on the cheerleading squad that I didn't want to be on to begin with because my biological parents made me be on that team and try out and stuff. It's one of those, well, I didn't want to be on the cheerleading squad to begin with, and oh darn, I got kicked off the cheerleading squad that I didn't want to be on. In basketball season is the irony of ironies on that. And I didn't want to be on the squad, and I will be honest, it's a little late now, but I am always honest anyway. But I will be honest in reference to if I knew all I had to do was flip the cafeteria table to defend my friend, to be kicked off of the cheerleading squad, I'd have done that so much sooner. I would have. For the squad that I didn't want to be on, I would have. I cannot tell a lie. Not pre-head injury, damn sure not after my head injury. And yeah, I don't know, like maybe like Kenny definitely would be able to be like, yeah, so she didn't want to be on that squad at all. Isn't it funny though that there's that Suicide Squad movie or something like that? And if any of those cheerleaders had anything to do with causing problems to my Medal of Honor art project, but not forgetting causing problems for my children, they technically would have committed suicide themselves. Don't deny that. You guys have a good one.